Manga and webcomics started making a name for themselves in the anime world with shows like God of High School, Noblesse, and Tower of God. Later on, more obscure stories like Lookism got an adaptation, and fans are waiting for the possible CG nightmare that would be the Solo Leveling anime. But with all these shows coming out, I'm always hurt because I feel like a TBATE anime would not see the light of day for a good while. It's honestly crazy to me, but after the recent adaptation of Mushoku Tensei and the worldwide praise it received, it made me think, wait a minute, anime fans would love a TBATE story. Why? Well, let's look at it this way. TBATE is a story whose earlier arcs were heavily inspired by Mushoku Tensei. I say inspired because Reddit might have you think it was flat out copied, but the honest truth is, artists and writers take inspiration from everything around us, but the main takeaway is how well you can use that inspiration to create something original. And that's what TBATE did. But if we want to bring up the similarities, there are a few that come to mind. Both Rudy and Arthur were reincarnated, obviously, but they both had dads who were great, quote, soldiers and mothers with healing abilities. They both made friends with elf girls that would possibly become love interests after saving them from being hurt when they were little, and both Arthur and Rudy learned magic and had a good affinity for it at a very young age while having the mind of a middle-aged man. Plus, they both have little sisters that they're protective of. Arthur and Rudy are both main characters who start the story as worse versions than they end up being. Arthur being one who was a lonely king learning what it meant to love and be loved, and Rudy being a shut-in learning how to become a better person, but in a different way because he could never really rely on anyone. But when it comes to their differences, I mean basically everything after the first book is a difference, but also the main personalities of the protagonists. Basically, Arthur is probably the biggest child there is next to Jinwoo, and you will never catch him like this.
They got your ass on camera.
But you know what? That makes me think that considering how controversial it was to like Rudeus, people won't have the same issue with Arthur. Think of it this way. Most people like Mushoku Tensei for the story but hate Rudy in the early years before his marriage and shit. Now what if Rudy was a likable guy with morals? What if he was a guy that readers wish they could be? Smart, sexy, strong, mature? It's a gold mine. Now TBATE is so good in how it wasn't able to stay in another story's shadow for too long. It became a story that fully explored what it means to be reincarnated and what it meant to try to really live a new life. Even in the early parts of the story, which are arguably the slowest parts because it focuses a lot on the characters in the world, we can see seeds being sowed which will literally make every light novel reader on Twitter be like, oh, if you think this was good, wait till so and so. We're able to learn what happens in Arthur's past that made him who he grew up to be in the main timeline, and unlike Rudy who was a good student whose life fell apart as he grew up, we learn about Arthur's past as the strong and powerful but lonely King Grey. But most importantly, a good amount of time is given to his flashback as well to flesh it out properly. That flashback could honestly be its own show. The story isn't just about him trying to become the strongest or win something, it feels like one guy making it a point to never lose what he cherishes again. He made a lot of mistakes in his past by seeking power and influence at the cost of those next to him, but now he wants power in order to protect them. We see the tough decisions he has to make knowing the consequences, like with that moment between him and his parents, and also the sacrifices he made leading up to and during the war. If TBATE gets animated and they don't shaft the pacing and story like with God of High School, it might be anime of the year whatever year it comes out. So with that being said, how can we hypothesize a TBATE anime and make it anime of the year? I'm going to go through some picks for the animation studio, music, sound director, animation director, character designers, and voice actor. And I picked these because I feel like sometimes they're the most important factors for an anime. So let's start with the biggest one. When anyone thinks of an animation studio for a story they love, I think the choices are very few. Ufotable is the first one that comes to mind. They're very skilled with animation and tax evasion, but of all the studios around, they're the only ones that can make a shitty or mediocre anime popular. Every time I watch a show produced by them that I don't like, I'm always focused on the background, the 3D camera movement, the layering, the colors, just basically everything that can stimulate your eyes, they're good at. But another good choice would be Studio Madhouse. They've worked on shows like Hunter x Hunter, One Punch Man, No Game No Life, and Death Parade, but what's so great about all these shows is that they look and feel so different from each other. That just goes to show the versatility of the studio. But I will say that MAPPA is a more versatile studio, but to be honest, I would feel bad if I wish they would take on more work because the work conditions over there are definitely scary with all the projects they have going on. So if I would give my vote for a studio, I'd give it to Studio Wit. Just looking at the animation in Great Pretender, Ranking of Kings, Villain Saga, and VV is enough to make you want to give them all your money. Wit is a passionate studio and I pray they can bounce back from their money issues and start producing more amazing shows again. But if Mushoku Tensei Studio Bind would take on TBATE, I wouldn't say no. For the character design, I wanted to pick someone that had a style that differs from how the manga has been drawn. Fuyuki's art is good, but anime is a different medium and must be treated as such even for art. So the first show that came to mind was Tower of God, and I looked into Miho Tanino. Tower of God has a very distinct look thanks to the animation style and designs, so it could work for TBATE as well. But another option would be Kyoji Asano, who did the designs for AOT and Psycho-Pass. But I'm honestly gonna go with Kazutaka Sugimiya. This man is an absolute mad lad. He worked on shows like Chainsaw Man, Wonder Egg Priority, Darling in the Franxx, Mushoku Tensei, Promised Neverland, and the JJK movie. He isn't always the character designer, but also works as a key animator sometimes. But he was a character designer for Mushoku Tensei and Chainsaw Man, and that's why I think he's the best pick. Music is probably one of the most important factors to me when it comes to anime because it can speak directly into your soul. Even if the animation is shit, a great music soundtrack can tell your mind what the visuals failed to do, and for an isekai it's super important to have amazing music. There's a reason why SAO can never leave my mind, and it's because of the Swordland OST. It's the main one that comes into my head whenever I want to think of a climactic battle or a boss event, and if you saw my Arthur vs Uto or Arthur vs Cadell videos, you know I love using that song because of how hype it is. And whenever people use hype and music in the same sentence, the first person that gets talked about is the legend Hiroyuki Sawano. He's one of the best in the business for the epic compositions and OSTs he's made, and even when he has other prominent musicians feature in a song, he manages to make them conform to his style. Despite how amazing his music is, I sort of feel like it's best suited for a show like Solo Leveling, which he's doing, and not TBATE. Those two shows have an entirely different feel to them, so I want to try and find someone else who may be able to make the first season of TBATE an absolute masterclass. And the next person that came in mind was Kevin Penkin. Kevin's probably the main reason I watched Shield Hero for as long as I did, and his work was so good that I listened to the Made in Abyss tracks just because I know he worked on it, without actually watching the anime. The range he showcased in those two shows alone puts him in a different category from Sawano. Sawano's songs are amazing, but they have the Sawano signature no matter how different they may be. If you hear one of his songs, you probably say to yourself, this sounds like Sawano. And as I was writing this, that exact thing happened. Now Kevin is a bit more diverse in that sense, but he still doesn't fit what I'm looking for yet. And my last option will be Yuki Kajira. She worked on Madoka Magica, SAO, Fate Zero, Vanitas, and Demon Slayer. That's some insane anime to have on your resume, to be honest, and she has a lot of isekai and dark anime experience that I feel she would be able to hit the mark for the show so well. Now picking someone for the sound design is the easiest decision. My choice would be Yasumasa Koyama. Anytime you hear sound effects in anime that have this sweet bass or explosions, it may be him. He did the Fire Force and Slime Isekai, which for me have some of the best sound design. Alright, so at this point we have the epic music, the sound effects, we have the character designs completed, and we know what studio is going to produce it. But who can we trust with storyboarding or actual direction? Luckily, anime doesn't suffer from a lack of good animation directors. We have Shinichiro Watanabe, Miyazaki, Hosoda, but there's usually a few who stand out from the rest. Tetsuro Araki hasn't done a large number of shows, but the ones he did have more weight to them. He did High School of the Dead, Death Note, and a few seasons of AOT. But if I'm being honest, I really wouldn't mind many directors taking over because we can hardly tell sometimes. But for whatever climactic event is coming, like maybe Arthur taking out the bandits to save Tess, or Sylvia battling Cadell before giving Arthur the egg, I would want those handled by Megumi Ishitani. That is it. I will say that this part was the hardest. I think trying to figure out the best voice actor for Arthur was probably the most difficult, and I know I'm probably going to be off for this, but one thing I wanted to do was at least have Kenjiro Tsuda play some sort of role in the show.
そういうとは他人任せな抽象的な質問は嫌いです。残業は嫌いなので手早く済ませましょう。異業手遅れとはいえ、人を殺めるのは気分が悪い。出てくるならさっさとしてください。
But consider how far off that is, let's just make him Viren for now. Either him or Hochu Otsuka.
やれ、この現象。夢でないとすれば、随分久しぶりに10年バズーカで過去へ来たようだ。最後の最後にやりたいようにやれた。好きにやった落とし前はつけなくてはな。先に行った奴らに顔向けできねえ。
Now Arthur as a person is generally usually sweet except when you have to fight him or if you piss him off like Lucas, so I wanted to find someone who could sound comforting and kind, but also have a strong enough voice to evoke anger and especially strength when he goes into Realm Heart. Because I personally think his voice will become deeper when he gets into Realm Heart, so let's test a few of these guys out.
俺はソロだ。 1日2日オレンジになるくらいどうってことないぞ。
お前は盗んだんだ、世界を、そこの住人を。
応援する。諦めるなよ。
ご希望通り再現しよう。あんたの死に様を
一瞬で終わらせてやる。場所を移そうぜ。ここでは俺は戦いたくねえ。
なんで死ぬのを怖がらなくちゃいけないんですか？死にたくないから生きてるんですか？生きてると何かいいことありますか？俺はなかったよ。今まで生きてきていいこと一つもなかったよ。
白津くん、少し黙ろうか。その程度か。やれやれ。僕はともかく寮のみんなに対してそこまで言われるとは思わなかったな。よし、決めたよ。白津くん、君のことは本気で叩き潰そうかな。
昔から自分から友達とか作れた試しがない。他人は苦手で関わりたくないくせに他人の目はすごく気になる。でも最近は強いと思うよ。
Honestly, for this portion, I don't know which one I would go for, so if you're here, just tell me who fits best in your opinion. This video was hella subjective, but I had fun with it. I hope you did too. Anyway, that's it for me today. Thanks for sticking around. Join the Discord I just created, by the way, and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace.